Mitch McConnell.
Yes, he is.
He's living it.
His latest, I guess, move has been to, and I don't know if it's quite officially happened yet, but he's going to get rid of a procedural blockage to judges being nominated, where you're allowed to hold the floor for 30 hours.
You have 30 hours, and then
and people should understand it's like 30 working hours, so it can really slow down the process. I mean, it can slow down the process. I don't know how to really sort of quantify it. I mean, but it can slow down the process of how many judges you get in. He's going to get rid of that. He's gotten rid of blue slips. It's pretty. He is completely remaking the judiciary, and just to remind people about the implications of it before we get into this, here is today a federal court in Kentucky. 2-1 decision, Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. And this is really stunning in a minute in terms of like, understand, and I don't want to get too far afield here, but the whole Janus case, which kneecapped public sector unions, is that by forcing people to pay an agency fee to the lawyers who negotiate your contract, if it's under a shop, you are infringing upon the free speech rights of a non-union member because they're having to give money. This judge, John Bush, appointed by Donald Trump, says that it is okay under the First Amendment to force physicians to do something that is completely not medically necessary for them to do their job, which is to perform. And I don't know if it's to actually like perform it on the specific women, but to show and describe a fetal ultrasound to patients before performing an abortion. It's not even on the woman necessarily.
Christ.
It is just like, it is basically, you need to go to an anti-abortion organization and sit there and watch a mandatory movie, essentially. And,
why do you support this, Alex?
But this is just one example, and there are a million examples of the implications of a circuit court judge being appointed by Donald Trump, because these are about as far right-wing judges as we've seen, I think, appointed, and they've been pretty far right-wing. McConnell has orchestrated all of this almost unilaterally.
Yeah, and I mean it's his like sort of ultimate political project, and it's been going on like, you know, he's been working on it since the 90s basically, but him and the Federalist Society have been in lockstep this entire time, and like they're getting their way, like they're just winning, and they're going to have installed these people who are going to be basically legislating from the bench for decades to come.
I mean, just like what point do you think McConnell, was this a question of McConnell? Because certainly the Garland thing, right? Like,
yeah,
I think that empty seat on the Supreme Court is one of the most underestimated reasons why Donald Trump isn't the president.
Oh yeah, totally, yeah. And like, so this is what I wrote about, and I have the cover of the New Republic. Pick it up at your newsstand. So I wrote about McConnell, and yeah, and he sort of says as much. But I think you can look at how Donald Trump won. And on the one hand, he genuinely convinced a bunch of people who don't normally vote for Republicans to come out and vote for him, because he was out there saying every day, like, I'm going to fight for Social Security. We're going to get out of these wars we're in. He was out there talking like a non-Republican. And McConnell was the one telling everyone, reassuring everyone, oh, by the way, he will govern like a Republican, meaning specifically he's going to appoint the judges we want.
Well, he was holding up a list.
Yeah.
Trump was holding up a list made by the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society that was basically like, here's my one promise to you.
Yep.
And that was the indication, right?
Yeah, and that's how you get a coalition together of like people who want to reject everything, and then people who are like, yeah, all right, he's gonna, like, the evangelicals and everyone else are
I think it's the
it.
evangelicals.
I mean, that's how he got the evangelicals. Yeah, he mobilized.
He was able to mobilize the evangelicals despite the fact being the most profane, example of humanity that you could imagine.
What?
So that also, McConnell too, him sort of in the background with Heritage and Federalist Society, getting Trump on the same page on judges, it was also the signal to all the Republican establishment, all right, I guess we don't actually need to prevent this guy from getting the nomination. We actually can just sort of sit back and see what happens. And McConnell's classic move is to sit back and see what happens. It was after the Access Hollywood tape. People are rushing to get statements out rejecting Trump, and McConnell's just let's see how this plays out. He does it all the time. He just doesn't talk until he sees how the situation's going to play out.
I am amazed at how much the Democrats and the media failed to hold Ryan and McConnell to account for any part of this.
I know. Yeah.
Crap show.
I know.
And McConnell just seems to me to be uniquely devoid of shame.
Oh yeah,
his statements that he came out the other day saying Obama should have done more to stop the Russians from interfering in the election. Yeah, that's stunning. Just remind people why that's so stunning.
So the intelligence agencies are saying well, Russia keeps hacking these emails and is trying to basically interfere in the election to hurt Hillary Clinton.
And they had tested their ability to get into voter rolls.
Yeah, they had been testing. They had just been sort of trying everything. It was like a kitchen sink. Let's just sort of mess around in all these little edges around the election. And so they brief Congress and they brief the leaders of Congress and Obama and it was let's all put out a statement condemning Russia for doing this so that people know that it's going on, and McConnell's no. He's I'm not signing on to any joint statement with you. I think his sticking point was you're not allowed to say that they want to help Trump win. I'll be Russia, don't interfere, but you're not allowed to actually tell the truth about what's happening. So he refuses to sort of be the Republican signing on to the statement condemning Russian interference.
So he, at that point, is on board, or that's all part of his I'm going to see how this shakes out. As long as I don't have to take any position that will sort of commit me to being on any side of this ledger.
Yeah,
because he's worried in Kentucky, right? Theoretically, of a primary at one point too.
Yeah. I mean, a couple years ago, he actually in the end he won handily, but he was so unliked by the base that there was a lot of energy around finding someone to primary him.
People forget that McConnell, if you listen to Mark Levin or any of those people on right-wing radio at that time, McConnell was demonized by them.
Oh yeah,
big time.
Yeah, and it's always been crazy because he's by far the most effective Republican politician of the modern era. In terms of achieving conservative ends and in terms of consolidating Republican power, I don't think you can point to anyone else who's been as effective as him. But they hate him because they know he's not actually in his heart a true believing conservative. He began his career basically as a quasi Rockefeller Republican, which I sort of have come to believe was purely strategic and not out of any sort of actual belief in moderation, because it was the 60s and 70s and you could still sort of believe that was the way forward but the day Reagan gets elected, he's a Reagan conservative, and they know he doesn't actually believe it. He was never one of the sort of young fire breathing ultra right wingers, but so then they didn't trust him. But it was also this thing where I think during the Obama years, they were just so mad that Obama was in office that any Republican who was in office was blamed for allowing that to happen.
Right.
so McConnell is stymieing Obama at every turn, but it's still you let this man be president. Why aren't you doing something about
why aren't
that?
you arresting him for being a non-American citizen?
Yeah.
So does McConnell just have no because he's putting on an incredibly.
Yeah.
He's not just he's not going for the record of how many judges get seated during a term of a president. These are hardcore right wingers. Folks who think Social Security was the day that we went communist in this country. The folks who think that this is. people make jokes about A Handmaid's Tale, but like,
Yeah.
so does he care about that, or is it just like he wants to leave a mark on this country and he doesn't really care what the mark is? He just knows that this is going to cut deep.
I think his personal ambition is primarily to have left a mark, to have been an influential and important person. But I think that with the ideology of the sort of people he's putting on the bench, like, so McConnell, he used to be pro-choice. He used to not care about any of that stuff. I think the social conservatism is partly just political strategy. But I think that he has the sort of oligarchic, like, because what he sort of started off caring about was campaign finance, and specifically about helping rich people help him get elected. And I think that actually sort of became the driving principle, was this sort of cycle, like reinforcing itself, where like the rich get to influence elections to help people who help the rich get elected in perpetuity. And I think that the real point of these conservative judges is to dismantle the regulatory state and sort of prevent a New Deal from ever happening again. And I think that's sort of all the stuff the evangelicals care about is sort of like just like a bonus for them, but it's like the real project is just.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's my sort of feeling on what
that
he
makes
believes.
a lot of sense. So it's just like having he has one issue set in terms of the regulatory state, which makes sense coming from Kentucky, right?
Yeah.
Like he doesn't want we should be doing we should have coal cars.
Yes.
Yeah. And
and he's been back when back before they all sort of consolidated, tobacco was a big backer of him, but coal's always been like, it's a huge part of his campaign war chest has been coal. And like, so he came from I
mean, that's the story of the Republican Party, though, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, on many respects, it's like the primary agenda is to roll back the regulatory state in any fashion, and the support that the government gives to people generally. Yeah. I mean, more specific, he likes some specific support, or narrowly tailored to wealthy people, and everything else is just sort of like are barnacles to them that are irrelevant, but also bring along a lot of support.
Yeah, and I think too, like, they know. I think McConnell knows, and this is actually another reason why he might not be that popular among the base. McConnell knows and has always known that his agenda is extremely unpopular, and this is why his number one move is to sort of hide in the background and fade into the wallpaper, because he knows he is not personally likable. He is not charismatic. He has always won elections because he has outraised his opponent. At first it was because he was outraised his opponent, and then now it's more because Kentucky politically has become a lot more conservative. And so the point of the judiciary is to prevent small d democracy, is to circumvent it, and that's been. I think that's been the project basically since they realized it was a lot harder for them to win national elections.
Why do you think the Democrats have never like run against Mitch McConnell in the way that the Republicans run against Nancy Pelosi?
I mean, the Democrats always assume the electorate they're looking for is like half Republican, right? Like they always assume that the people they need to win over are ones who secretly in their heart of hearts want to vote for the Republican but need to be convinced to vote for the Democrat. So like they don't, and McConnell too. I mean, Democrats don't believe in villainizing people. They really, really, really don't believe in villainizing people. So he really is allowed, I guess, to get away with so much, which is funny.
So, related question. Why do you think it is that McConnell has made his career pandering to the most extreme reactionary elements of the base of the Republican Party and telling them you can have everything you want, and been very successful in that, whereas the Democrats do not seem to have that strategy on the left?
Well, we know the Democrats, like, this is a cliche in politics at this point, but Republicans are scared of their base and Democrats sort of hate their base. Right. Which is like, that's the cliche. And the incentives are just so wildly different because the media ecosystem is so different, especially now. Like Murdoch really, like Murdoch and talk radio completely changed the way Republicans relate to their own base. And Democrats don't have, like, I mean, because so many of them still, they like getting their news from CNN and NPR, like no one is pushing them to be like, demand more of your Democratic representatives.
Right.
You know?
I think they might be a little scared of their base too.
I mean, they're becoming a little bit more scared of their base now, but that's a very recent development.
Or
Yes.
at least their potential base
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think that's what like AOC is.
That's what the DCCC. That's what the
Right,
entire
exactly.
story of the DCCC thing.
Exactly.
is.
The DCCC thing is the DCCC, and I think we mentioned this when they announced this policy, and they supposedly had this policy.
It was like an unofficial.
It was an unofficial policy, which is if you go after, if you are a contractor, you have a political shop, or you're fundraising, or
You're a
you
pollster,
make
yeah.
pollster, you make signs, political signs, or whatever it is, and you work for a primary challenger
to any Democratic
to
incumbent.
any Democratic incumbent, they will not give you
They won't give you work. They'll,
work.
You won't get to work for any other campaigns. And all these consultants basically rely on the DCCC and other organizations to find work every election.
So, and that just the idea that they're putting it out there is just meant to have a chilling effect.
Yes. Yeah.
And I guess the real question is like, part of the problem is if the Republican, if the RCC or whatever it
Yeah.
is had done the same thing, everybody would be like, that's fine because the Koch brothers.
Yeah,
have
that's the other thing too. So the incentives matter too in terms of the money. And so McConnell, his whole deal, starting from the second he got elected to the Senate, was campaign finance reform. But he would do it in this way where it was originally, because campaign finance reform used to be quote unquote bipartisan. Everyone agreed we should find a way to limit money in politics. And then it was a Howard Schultz thing. It was like, well, we all agree this is a problem and we just disagree
Right.
on the solutions. So McConnell's game for like the first decade of his career was just deciding what sort of campaign finance regulations he supported based on what he thought would be helpful to Republicans and what would harm Democrats. But as everything sort of got rolled back, and as income inequality meant that the rich were getting richer and richer and they were using their money to more directly involve themselves in politics, he just sort of came to be like, well, I guess we shouldn't have restrictions because there's this like more money just helps our side. Because it used to be sort of arguable with when unions were more powerful that
Right.
more spending could be beneficial to Democrats. But like now it's like clearly money's on the side of Republicans. But he also sort of, when he did support some restrictions, it was out of this establishment Republican belief that we can't just let the rich people sort of dictate everything because we need to keep these things within the party institutions. We need to keep them giving to our party institutions so we have some control over it. Like they don't actually they don't love having to like dance for at what the Kochs and the Mercers say.
Of course not.
They don't love
right
that.
Yeah, because they're all they all have their own egos.
They all
and
have their own
they all have their own specific agendas of how to do evil things.
Yeah, so he would
people can argue that's where you do have that agreement. Like we all agree that this is not a problem. We just need to figure out how to avoid dealing with it in our own unique
We
way.
all want to
Yeah.
take food out of children's
Right,
mouths.
exactly.
The question is, how do we get there?
Right. How do we starve
That
the
is
people?
great.
We all agree we should starve the people. How do we
Mitch
do that?
McConnell, Howard
Yeah.
Schultz. No one in this room.
What is this
opposes
video now
increasing pollution.
that Meghan McCain had
Oh
a
my
real
God.
problem standing up for Mitch McConnell?
Meghan McCain.
So Adam Parkhomenko, who was of Ready for Hillary fame, found a video of Mitch McConnell stumbling and posted it. And Meghan McCain then defended Mitch McConnell. So do we want to watch the video of him stumbling?
I mean, I think we should.
Yeah, we probably
Just
should.
for full
For context.
for
Journalistic
context.
reasons.
Adding the music might be a bit corny, but
There you go. And Meghan McCain found that video to Mitch McConnell had polio as a child and his leg is partly paralyzed because of it. Again, where is our empathy and compassion? Fight him on policy if you disagree with him, but this is just gross and heartless. And I mean, I think, public figures get made fun of. And I think like that's
it's not beanbag.
I have a feeling like denying hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people health insurance a little bit more gross.
You know,
A little
guys,
bit more
there's a
heartless.
movement in this
Like,
country
where
to
is our
compare
empathy?
people losing health insurance to making fun of Mitch McConnell
This is-
falling, and that's really scary.
Parkhomenko is funny. He's
Who is Parm?
he's
don't
a,
know
I mean
who
he's
that
a
is.
complete psycho. He is
Who
like,
is he?
but he was Clinton. He was Hillary Clinton. He had some
Oh,
title on the
oh,
Clinton
okay,
campaign. He
okay.
was like
He started
the
ready
Clinton
for
person.
Hillary.
He
and then
started ready for Hillary, and then his title on the campaign was like like head of grassroots or something.
Oh, so he's
but
nuts.
he's
Okay.
one of those people who believe he's like almost like a David Brock type, where he's one of those people who believes we got to fight as dirty as they do, but their way of doing it is just so confusing. Because it's never like for anything. So he's like, for him, he's like, this is I'm fighting dirty just like they do, and it's like, here's a video of Mitch McConnell falling over.
That is
Wow.
great. They
They're
set up
so
secret Oppo
bad at
research and laundered false information through the New York Times. You know what I'm going to do in response? Look at Mitch McConnell falling. He's a fucking loser.
It's like a Muppet trying to be mean or something.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we got to take a break. We come back. Dave Feldman, do you want to stick around? We're going to